I'm Rob Downey, a family practice MD and Institute for Functional Medicine certified practitioner. I'm coming to you from Seaworthy Functional Medicine in Homer, Alaska. Seaworthy exists to help people overcome their health challenges and be fully vital. Dr. Jessie is the physician founder of Well Empowered, where she practices data-driven, heart-centered functional medicine. She created Well Empowered with one commitment in mind, guiding you in creating the health and vitality that transforms your experience of life and alters what is possible. How does Dr. H live true to this? By taking a root cause natural medicine approach that marries heart and science. Through working one-on-one with groups, Dr. H provides access to the information, inspiration, and strategies you need to produce sustainable and transformative health outcomes. And our DNA is a little similar. We're both physicians and we're both IFM certified practitioners. So that's an interesting Venn diagram overlap right out of the gate. As I got ready for today's visit, I was just so intrigued by where we're going with this, because your take is different than other functional medicine thought leaders. And that's what's so exciting for our participants, who I thank for joining us, is finding the thought leader that's the fit for them. So should we just start with what's the, talking about sort of the sacred, or should we talk about middle ground? Just how should we land on your work?
I think starting with the sacred is a great place to start, because it's a natural segue to what comes next.
And it's so beautiful and provocative. What a great word.
Yeah. So, as you said there, I really see, one's health journey as a sacred journey, and really a journey of honoring one's health as sacred. And it's not the conversation we were born into, right? It's the conversation we were born into around our health gets a little messy pretty quickly, right? It's more about good, bad, right, wrong, and oftentimes lands people in a sense of shame for feeling inadequate, or really just being hindered in their capacity to progress and evolve by this good or bad morality conversation that's really at the heart of of what we've inherited in this area of our life. Right. And to me, when we engage in this work, it really is for almost everyone, whether they can put words to it or not, whether they know it or not. It's in service of something bigger, right? When people really step into honoring their health as sacred, it's because they get, on a very deep and visceral level, the connection between how they care for their body and their health and themselves, and how they're able to contribute to this world, how they're able to show up in this world, how they're able to experience the beauty and the wonder of other people and, life itself. And so to me, it's, like, gosh, what's more sacred than that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm. There's just there's so much there. The danger here is, as the host, there's so much good stuff there. I have to be really disciplined about, about how to try to lay this out in a fashion that's most helpful to folks. But as we segue then into learning more about that, I should share that in 23 years of conventional medicine and 18 years of functional medicine, I have noticed about both myself and others, the way we show up for what we care about is a stronger driver than self-interest. Or maybe it's the difference between self-interest and enlightened self-interest, I'm not sure. But when I talk with folks about sort of loving themselves, taking care of themselves, a lot of them don't resonate. But when we talk about what they want to show up for, a lot of folks are, and I don't know, I know we'll be kind of talking about people's wounds today too, and whether that's an artifact of Western industrialized culture or our mechanistic view of the world. But It's been very, very striking to me when we talk to people about showing up for their grandkids or their spouse or uh, their, community or the earth, or they just want to be a productive member of their business or help those who are disadvantaged. That's really where a lot of people's juice come from. Is that part of what we're talking about today?
Absolutely, absolutely. And you said it so perfectly, Rob, that, when people, sometimes when we talk about self-love, it can kind of, it can, at first glance, take just not have the depth that you and I are really speaking to, right? And when people dig in and kind of begin to peel back the layers and start to answer the question, what is my life for,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And what is foundational to your life but your health, right? There's a quote I heard many moons ago. You've probably heard it too, right? I think it's written by unknown. If you don't take care of your body, where will you live? Right. And so it's,
Yeah.
there's this, okay, not just taking care of your body so that you can be here like existing, but taking care of your body so that you can show up fully for the
Mhm.
people and the things, the causes that you care the most about.
Mhm. Mm. Beautiful. So, for today's purposes, should we use weight as kind of a proxy for health because people's weight can be a wound, and so many folks are vexed by kind of their stuckness with that? I mean, is that a good way to hang the, good bones to hang the meat of the discussion on?
I think that's perfect. And, I would just invite any of you who are listening right now. I know at least in my experience, this is a big topic for many people. And you don't need to listen to me. It's like, look at what's going on with these GLP-1 agonists
Hmm.
and the sales and
Hmm.
how many people are turning to them for a solution
Hmm.
because they feel really, overwhelmed. And
Hmm.
I've got no judgment about that. But
Hmm.
we know that for a lot of people, it's very much on their mind and on their heart. But if that's not you, just reach for something else every time we speak to weight. Pick the thing that's on your mind, whether it's your energy or your hormones or your digestion, or
Hmm.
your mood, any of those. Just replace when we say weight with whatever's on your
Perfect.
mind.
Perfect.
Mm-hmm.
So, the key principles today then are sort of differentiating between all and nothing versus another approach. And am I getting the phrase right? Weight is a wound.
Yeah, I do see weight as kind of like the manifestation of many wounds over
Mm,
time.
mm,
Um, Sometimes there's one central wound, but it's commonly, kind of like the paper cut over and over and over again, sort of thing. That's
mm.
showing up as weight.
And
Yeah,
I do think our audience will have resonance with this. Everything from, adverse childhood events. Um, who's the author of The Myth of Normal?
oh
Um,
yeah, Gabor Mate.
Gabor Mate.
Yeah.
Thankful Keisha Ewers and her work on trauma.
Hmm.
And so, um, what, like, let's say somebody's carrying an extra 40 pounds. They've been
Yeah.
really frustrated. They've tried everything, and
Yes.
then they work with you. But again, it could be fatigue, autoimmunity, unhappy guts with a normal workup. And so, what would they anticipate about what you bring and how to? This is the center of the matrix: mental, emotional, spiritual. In terms of how
Yeah.
you invoke that and bring that into their analysis, what's the sort of on the ground feeling of somebody? I was really touched looking at some of your reviews, just people talking about glowingly, about what a huge difference you've made in their
Thank
lives.
you.
And so, what should somebody anticipate then? How did they break the spell as they start working with you? Because I think that's what they're reporting. They're saying, I'm trying everything and it's not working. Of course, I'd think about turning to a drug because I'm just so frustrated.
Yeah, that's break the spell is a great way to put it. And where we start, Rob, is by really getting clear on what I call your vision of vitality for your health and your life, your vision of vitality. And this is really a very self-authored thing, right? And we could call it a self-authored intention, even. And where we begin, I'll invite all of you who are listening to actually complete this first step in the exercise as a way to start to get a glimpse of what this would look like for you. And where you'll start is by doing a little bit of time traveling. So I invite you to time travel to the 5-year future. So the 5-year future, right? So I'm 47, I'm 52 in this 5-year future, right? And in this 5-year future, I invite you to tell the story of what it is to be you, thriving with your health and vitality as you desire and intend they occur. And tell the story in first person present tense. So by that, I mean, I'm 52 and my body is resilient, strong, and moves about the world with ease. That would just be an example, right? You'll have your own thing to say, but you'll say what that future is, and really go deep into it. What's it like for you to interact with your friends and your family, or engage in your hobbies or professional work? Like, what is it like for you to live, simply put, in this 5-year future where your health and vitality are as you intend and desire they occur? So that's the first point, is really starting to formulate, like bring words to. It's really, formulate's not the right word. It's really bring words to, because I really believe it's in you, right? This is in you, and you just, it's just putting it down on paper, authoring your intention, and your intention starts to act like your North Star. Now, certainly that's not all there is to do, but that's where we start. That's where we start. And then along the way, right, we're going to start to look at where your wounds are interfering with your progress towards your North Star. And of course, we're going to get some information. We're going to get lab work. We're going to get data to understand what is going on physiologically with your body, right? In this case, what are your barriers to weight loss, right? For someone who's dealing with energy, what are your barriers to, feeling energized, right? But in this case, right, where are your physiological barriers to weight loss, so that we can start to be targeted in your approach moving ahead, in your progress moving ahead, and along the way, healing wounds, right? There is no quick fix here, right? I really think about this journey, like 1 year being one lap. And, in 1 year, and I'm sure you see this as well, right? In 1 year, we encounter all of who we are and all of life, right? We encounter all of our emotions, our challenges, our joys, our struggles, our triumphs, all of it, right? And we encounter all of the different environments that are going to call on us to create new solutions from our heart that align with our vision of vitality, whether that's a regular Friday night or a regular Wednesday afternoon, whether it's a vacation or a holiday, right? All of these things, right? We're looking at, how do we live aligned with our vision of vitality? How do we honor our health as sacred, which doesn't mean be quote unquote perfect, right? In these varying situations and with the waves of life, so to speak.
That's remarkable. Quick tangent, just because so many of our audience are aware of folks who work remotely. Just what would somebody anticipate? I don't want to use too much of your bandwidth on this, but how does somebody get labs when they work with someone remotely? Is this all kind of freestanding stuff now where you sort of say, hey, here's where you can get this, a 6-part thyroid panel or a gut
Right.
metabolism
Yeah.
test? How's that work now? Because I imagine a lot of our audience actually does sort of need and want to know that interface zone between a remote expert and labs.
Absolutely. Yeah. So there are a few different things. If someone is in the state of Illinois where my license lives and has
Mm-hmm.
PPO insurance, we use that insurance.
Mm-hmm.
If they're not, which is common, then we turn to either Function Health or Ulta Labs. Those are kind of
Got
like
it.
the two different options that I'll turn to. There are times where I'll give someone a list of labs if they have a good relationship with their,
Mm-hmm.
MD or OB-GYN or, whatever the
Yeah.
case may be. And they'll go to them and say, hey, would you mind ordering these labs for us? And usually they're either a complete yes or a partial yes, which is
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. Well, thanks. As we segue then to things worth noting just about the potential value of working with Dr. H. One is just that when you can work with somebody who can incorporate labs, you can get better quicker. And I think I also have the blessing of talking to a lot of folks whose what I would describe as empiric strategies work brilliantly as well, where they work through the person's history and they're able to get people a lot of ground back without labs, but also uh, so many people's stuck point is a missing relationship with the sacred right out of the gate. It's the reason that a lot of cases don't proceed, in that my finding in my practice has just been that I feel an ethical imperative that we look at the whole person and be honest.
Mm.
And I'm really concerned that there's a lack of candor about the mental. Well, my summary has been you can't supplement your way out of a lifestyle deficit, and you can't lifestyle your way out of a mental, emotional, spiritual black hole. And so if you start with the sacred right out of the gate, your approach invites people to say, let's include the power core of our health, which is deliberately right at the center of the IFM matrix. Let's include that in the conversation. So I think our listeners ought to know there's two super, super powerful dimensions of what you're talking about today, worth really perking their ears up about.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love what you said there. That's great.
So then what do next steps feel like? How do people decide whether to work with you one-on-one or in groups? Because sometimes I think when people hear experts, one of the things they really want to know is just what would it feel like to work with Dr. H, right? Like
Yeah.
how would I, again, okay, I'm in. I want to know what the sacred is for me, but I've got my self-esteem doesn't work. And every time I think about the sacred, the very next thing I feel is that I'm worthless, right? And then I'm,
Right.
eating my emotions. I mean, that's part of how do they, what do the action items look like as they take next steps?
Yeah, well, in the way of taking next steps and considering working together, I always offer people the opportunity to schedule a complimentary consultation. And it's actually, I should say, not even an offer. It's really the first step because I
Mm-hmm.
always want to make sure it feels like a good fit,
Mm-hmm.
right? There are lots of wonderful practitioners out here as you shared out of the gate, right? And so I really want people to find the person who's going to best serve them and their journey. And so if I get to be that, that's wonderful. But also, if I'm not, that's okay too, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the top priority is you as an individual thriving. So that's where we start, and we do engage in that conversation of what is beginning the conversation of what is your vision of vitality, and that consultation, and that time together also gives me the opportunity to learn what you're dealing with, logistically with your health, and start to think about what are the missing puzzle pieces, the labs that we'd want to gather to begin to understand your body best.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So cool. Another thing I flashed on while you were talking is that we believe the stories we tell ourselves. And
Yes.
then this positive psychology dimension of even we can create a story in the future that then is our North Star, but it also it's like a gravity then pulling us forward into the what would get described sort of mystically as, this like holographic aspect of reality, right? And
Yes.
it's so powerful, the degree to which the stories we tell ourselves become true. It's really okay. I should speak personally on this one. As a kid, I read this book by an author named Richard Bach called Illusions. It's dated now. I'm not even necessarily a fan of all of his work, but I was really moved by that one. And he said, we can change the future. And then in the book, this was an 18-year-old reading this, he said, we can change the past as well. And I didn't understand that for the longest time. And then as I worked through sort of what a great guy my dad was, but also some hangups we had, a bunch
Mhm.
of my criticisms of him softened when I saw it through the lens of multi-generational hardship,
Yes.
the hand he got dealt from, a bunch of hard scrabble Spokane, Washington wheat farmers and railroad engineers, and the impact of the Depression and World War II on his consciousness.
Sure.
And so I did end up changing the past, and that new relationship with my storyline about my wounds, to
Hmm.
self-esteem
Hmm.
informs a story I can tell myself about where I am now and where I am in the future. So when you talk today about the sacred, I am relating to it on a cellular level. I'm sitting here resonating, thinking, yeah, I can relate to that. This is really beautiful. This is really powerful. And so I would encourage our audience today to know, those of us that took hits to our self-esteem, one of the things we need to be willing to ask ourselves is whether we're willing to do something beautiful and helpful to ourselves to show up for the world.
Yeah, that is so perfectly said. And I love the way you shared your own story about, being able to see your dad and potential challenges within your relationship and how he showed up in the context of, what came before and what came before and what came before, right? Because it really does. It shifts everything when we're able to see the complexities of this life and how people are who they are and ultimately begin to be able to see it all as in some magical way contributing to our evolution.
Mhm. Mm, mm. All right. Well, what principles should people know about so that when, after this interview, right, like what's your
Yeah.
areas of expertise that we're going to keep talking about so people, take empowerment, another
Yes.
great word.
Yeah, well, I would say, a few more things I'd add about, we started with honoring your health as sacred, but, the next thing I'd start to invite people to look at, we've spoken a little bit about our inherited perspectives in this area of health. And, to speak to some of the wounds around weight, what we have inherited is what I like to call an all or nothing approach, right? And this is expressed in our actions as deprivation or overindulgence, deprivation or overindulgence. And, you might see this as like if you can relate to the experience of, the Whole 30 followed by a bottle of wine and a big pizza on day 31, there's a great, real life example of deprivation overindulgence, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
the thing about this all or nothing approach is, first of all, it just doesn't work, right? Like
Hmm.
people don't arrive at the outcomes they care the most about, nor do they feel empowered or do they feel like they're coming from self love in this endeavor, right? It
Hmm.
really is, they're two different sides of the same coin that I call self aggression, right? So overindulgence or deprivation. And, overindulgence is different than indulgence, right? And, what we could say a little bit more about that is when we overindulge, we typically feel owned by the moment or the food or the emotions. We don't really have the experience of being at choice.
Hmm.
And we don't feel proud of ourselves.
Hmm. Hmm.
And, with indulgence, we have the experience of having say. And after the fact, we feel perfectly proud of ourselves,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And, we're able to be present in those moments versus with overindulgence. Most people don't have I used to work with a woman. She was so great. She used to say, I don't know what happened. I blacked out and ate a pint of ice cream. Okay, let's to be clear.
Yeah.
Those can't happen together, right?
Great description, though. Very
Yes,
evocative. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Perfect description, right? Really captures the experience people have in those moments of
Hmm.
overindulgence, right?
Hmm.
But, when people are indulging versus overindulging, they're absolutely present. They make the choice and they move on, right? And so that is the journey, moving from closing the door on this inherited approach, this approach of self aggression, and
Hmm.
shifting it to one of self-love. And in this journey of self-love, where we're honoring our health as sacred, it's a journey of mastering your middle ground.
Mm.
Your middle ground, what is that place where you're feeling not too tight, not too loose, right? There's
Hmm.
a term called strong like bamboo, right? It's
Mm.
strong enough to be used for building, and it's also flexible enough to be able to be used for building. We need both.
Hmm.
And so it
Mm.
really is, just such a, I love being part of this work with people, and to see people begin to um, gather the information, right? Because, right, we are looking to produce real outcomes.
Hmm.
Yes, we want you to experience being empowered and experience coming from self love. And we want measurable outcomes. We want the outcomes you care about on the scale, on your labs, all of it.
Hmm. Mm. Brilliant. Yeah, I really want our audience to know this is just absolutely brilliant. This is uh, the, a similar dimension of this that happens in my practice now. It took me years to suss out, and it's now the most powerful thing I do. Brief anecdote, not to focus too much on wounds, because even that, telling ourselves that story, telling the story of our wounds versus the story of our healing, those are two related but different stories too, in terms of which narratives we're feeding. But this person was very depleted because of just the amount of responsibility this person has on their plate is a ton, a ton, a ton, and they're not really aware of a way to soften that. And I asked about some boundaries that could be set, and essentially the person sort of said they would jump in front of a speeding train to save a child, etc., and all this heroic stuff. And I said, well, if you'll do anything, will you be nice to yourself? This pause. Well, that might be a bridge too far. And I said,
Right.
well, what if replenishing your cup so your cup spills over? What if that's the mission critical thing that needs to happen for you to show up? And they said, okay, I'll look at that. I'll
Yeah.
look at that. So just
Right.
just our shocking capacity to be hard on ourselves and our somewhat denuded capacity to be kind as a way of garnering our superpowers. These are really interesting distinctions to me in sort of Western industrialized culture.
Yes. Yeah. And speaking of, like Western industrialized culture, right? There's so much we could say, but I think a lot about how, listen, we all need to make money so that we can live our lives, fundamentally
Hmm.
speaking, right? So
Hmm.
I'm not anti-capitalistic or anything like that, but we we marinate in an environment where oftentimes the tactics, and they are tactics, companies use to grow their business are not honoring humanity, right?
Hmm.
They're really pushing on insecurities, or amplifying fears, just all of these things. And
Hmm.
um, oh goodness, that just is
Hmm.
that creates a whole mess of wounds that
Mm.
it takes something to begin
Mm.
to first of all, perhaps
Yeah.
consider shifting your environment to minimize your exposure to those kind of messages to the extent that you
Yeah.
can.
Yeah.
But then also just to be able to see them for what they are and set them aside.
Mm. Well, this is so important. And my hope with the Field Notes podcast has always been that it is an exploration and that the audience gets a chance to hear dimensions of the story they don't necessarily get to hear in other settings or in a book. I'd like to briefly stop on this because I remember when I shared with you getting ready for today's session, I was north of the Arctic Circle from 2000 until 2002. And by the time I arrived in northern Alaska, I had in medical school, I'd had an emergency room doctor of all people come in at the University of Utah, a very conservative place. And this emergency room doctor talked about how learning how to provide Reiki healing energy to his wife gave her 8 hours of relief per session as sorry, this is very poignant, she died from cancer.
Mm,
Morphine gave her 30 minutes to an hour of relief, and a Reiki session with her husband, not even putting his hands on her, gave her 8 hours of relief.
mm,
And so he came in and just said, hey, conservative, skeptical medical students,
yeah.
you need to know there's
Yes.
more happening in the world than we fully understand. And uh, and so then fast forward, somebody up in Kosovo offered to do a Reiki session for me, who's a Reiki master. And the consent before the session was just to be prepared if I accepted healing energy to accept the consequences, including
Mm,
unanticipated changes to my life. And
wow.
I thought,
That's
well, that's a really
amazing.
interesting consent. And one of the things I wanted to share when you talked about jobs and whether or not we're in a humane environment that honors, I mean, if we spend 40 hours a week plus in environments that don't honor the sacred in us,
Yeah.
and then our personal healing journey is around honoring the sacred, there can be a discordance there that's very toxic and swimming against a lot of current. And so some of the conversations that happen in my practice will be the person thinking they needed the right supplement and they need the right job.
Oh, that's so well said. Right. Yeah.
so
That is so great.
so
Yes.
I hope folks have the courage to say some of when you articulate your 5-year plan and you think, am I audacious enough to become who I'd really like to be?
Right.
Sometimes really intoxicating things around, oh, do I want to really go ahead and anticipate the job I want to
Mhm.
have? Am I going to have the courage to do that? Am I going to have the courage to set some boundaries at work and see what happens and try to, trust that I'm going to land on my feet?
Mhm.
Um, and a lot of the things that companies want and a lot of things that are about productivity at work have to do with being vibrantly healthy. So those folks have a competitive advantage.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, that's so well said. I love that waiver that you signed. That's great.
I thought,
Yeah.
yeah, what a consent. Are you prepared to be
Yes.
healthy? Are you prepared to deal with the consequences? I thought, oh,
Uh-huh.
wow, I'm going to be reflecting on that for a long time. And
For
I did struggle
sure.
with it because I had this narrative around just the gritty, heroic feeling of staying up all night and admitting patients and picking the right antibiotic for pneumonia and just everybody. Then when I transitioned to practice here in Homer and wasn't admitting patients to hospital any longer, part of my identity, just like a butterfly coming out of the cocoon. I mean, part of my identity got shed that I didn't get that rush anymore of being the one to pick the right
Mhm.
antibiotic or to call the chopper from Anchorage. And I thought, no problem. We've got heroes in our community doing that stuff. We don't have enough people doing the thing. I, just there's uh, an inadequate amount of resource around the thing I do relative to the conventional resource. So this is a sensible. And I was even happy to be challenged by the growth opportunity of letting go of that part of my identity. I thought, oh yeah, I'm ready. But
Yes.
back
Yeah.
in 2001, I wasn't. That was a big part of my
Right.
identity.
Yeah. And I think, I imagine for your listeners, I imagine they can hear themselves in that in different ways,
Hmm.
right? How do we each uniquely get that I would might call it a dirty dopamine hit,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, dirty in
Yeah.
the sense that it really doesn't serve our higher self, right? But
Hmm.
for a variety of reasons, maybe we grew up in a household that that thing was considered I'm sure you like me work with people who it is the badge of honor to whether they're in banking or whatever medical, they're in medicine also, or whatever they're in, to pull all-nighters, right? For example, right? But it's not like, it's not like their child is sick and needs their help. And maybe they are sometimes, and that's true,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
it's creating this recurring, this cycle of, okay, this actually isn't a match for my vision of vitality, for my intention. But it's a habit of sorts, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's to
Mm-hmm.
seek out that dirty dopamine hit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe we can even tie it to your example, because I absolutely want our audience to come away with that feeling of, okay, what would that feel like to then be in my place of how I relate to, a healthy meal and a piece of cookie, right? Or
Yeah,
I'm in
right.
that mode, and half a glass of wine,
Yes. Yes.
and feeling good about it the whole time. And
Mhm.
so there again isn't that sort of gritty heroism of I'm going to forego everything this meal, or I'm going to, black out and eat the whole pint. And
Right.
some of that is that I hear this from my patients all the time, and I've experienced it myself, that feeling of, oh, this is what it means to be me in my
Yeah.
power.
Hmm.
And this is a different feeling. And am I willing to keep feeling good? That's one of the
Yes.
oddest things to me of all, is just, am I willing to is let some of the drama go?
Yes. Yeah. Well, and I would even count that drama as part of like the dirty dopamine
Hmm.
hit,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? It's
Yeah.
like,
Now we're at the center. Now we're at the center of it. So I think part of letting go is, again, maybe by showing up more for the things we care about, we become a little more, uh, and less of the focus is on us, and
yes.
we're getting our dopamine from really, and the other things we want to feel and experience from a cleaner, more sustainable source. But we're letting go of some of that not non self-serving drama.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And some of it happens by way of, I mean, gosh, I'm sure like you, I've done a lot of different healing, reached for different healing tools on my journey, right? And so, for you listeners, right, I'm sure you'll find for yourself, and you probably have already, that incorporating different healing tools at different times is how you evolve, whether it's Reiki or acupuncture or cranial sacral therapy, or going for a jog, or doing
Hmm.
yoga, or
Hmm.
getting a better night's sleep, right? There's so many different ways we heal over time. And you'll craft your own unique journey. But yeah, that as we begin to shift our attention to where we're going, right, rather than, because our brain doesn't understand not, right, like, don't think of a pink elephant. Your brain
Yeah.
does not, what you just do, right?
Yeah.
So when we begin to practice focusing on where we're going towards, some of the pull to do things that aren't self-honoring
Mm.
begins to dissipate with time and
Hmm.
practice. Again,
Hmm.
this is not there is no 30-day makeover.
Yeah. 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 Again, a very honest assessment, I think, of folks knowing they've got a longer project, but each step of progress along the way of a longer project is very satisfying. They are getting what they showed up for, because
Yes.
those early steps of healing are like a, cool glass of water on a hot day in the
Yes.
desert. Folks are immediately saying, oh, there's something really satisfying about what's happening now.
Yes. And
Mm.
it's so fun, when people arrive at a place where, that dirty dopamine, we could also call it self-sabotaging, right?
Hmm.
Kind of action they used to take, when they arrive at a place where they're like, I wouldn't even consider doing it because it just wouldn't feel good. Like,
Hmm.
they
Hmm.
feel that pull forward by what feels good.
Hmm.
And that's a beautiful thing to see.
Mm. Awesome. Well, you've been so gracious to let this be a wide-ranging conversation today. I really appreciate you doing that. Are there dimensions of your wisdom you didn't get to share that we should make sure and invoke?
Well, I would say, for your listeners, for all of you out there, just know that oftentimes the most powerful next step is playing your best game and being gentle and honest with yourself about what your best game is, right? Because your best game is going to be different than my best game and Rob's best game, right? We all have a different best game, totally fine. So for you, if your best game is having 2 pieces of pizza instead of 5, I know the two of us will be applauding you in that endeavor, right? If your best game is getting, maybe you intended to get a 45-minute workout in, but work and family commitments, life got in the way, and all you have is 10 minutes. If your best game is getting moving for 10 minutes instead of 45, wonderful. So start ditching that all or nothing approach. Start stepping into a question with yourself called, what is my best game right now?
Awesome. Wow. What a great opportunity to get to spend time with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It has been such a pleasure to be here with you and your audience. And, I feel that your high vibration, and I know your community does too. So thank you for welcoming me to be a part of it.
Delighted. Where can people find you?
You can find me at wellempowered.com, and on Instagram at wellempowered. And if you do choose to look at partnering, scheduling a complimentary consultation, please let me know that Dr. Rob here sent you, and you will be gifted with 10% off any work we do together. And, I just really thank you again for welcoming me to be a part of this.
Well, it's a privilege. Well, have a great day.
Thanks so much. You too.
Thanks for joining us for the Seaworthy podcast. Seaworthy exists to help people overcome their health challenges and be fully vital. If you think we've earned it, please consider giving this podcast a like, subscribing, and giving us a 5-star rating on the platform of your choice. Thanks.